Samsung Galaxy S5 is hot off the press, sporting a next-generation Snapdragon 801 processor, a new 16-megapixel camera on the back, and some novel features like a heart rate sensor. The Xperia Z1 is Sony's flagship phone for last year, which was announced just 6 months ago and soon will be replaced by the yet-to-be-released Xperia Z2. That's not to say that the Z1 doesn't have flagship specs though, as the handset offers a 1080p display, just like the S5, a still fast Snapdragon 800, and a whopping 20-megapixel camera on the back. This is Daniel from Phone Arena, and that's why we're staging a fight between the two, as the Z1 now comes cheaper than the S5. But will it be missing something if you go the Xperia way? Is this S5 newcomer clearly superior over Sony's 2013 flagship? Let's find out. The Samsung Galaxy S5 has a plastic, water-resistant body with removable back cover, while the Sony Xperia Z1 has a premium chassis that's comprised of a sturdy metallic frame with a glass front and back. Needless to say, the materials by themselves tell us clearly how these two handsets differ in their design approach. While the Galaxy S5 arguably has a more sophisticated look than ever before with its perforated rear design, its plastic construction lacks the solid feel attached to the steel and glass Xperia Z1. The removable back cover, however, gives easy access to the swappable battery, while the chassis of the Z1 has the unit sealed inside. Looking at the specs sheet on paper, the S5 is slightly thinner and lighter, but in reality this is hardly noticeable. Both phones seem too big for the screen size and cumbersome to use with one hand. On another count, they both sport a watertight chassis that lets them swim in water, but the depth certifications are in favor of the Z1. Sony's phone is tagged IP58, which means it can stay in up to 5 feet, 1.5 meters of water for more than an hour, while the S5 carries IP67 certification, so it can lounge in up to 3 feet, 1 meter of water for half an hour. Samsung is betting big on biometrics with the Galaxy S5, offering a finger scanner embedded in the home key underneath the display. It is a bit cumbersome to use, however, requiring you to swipe directly over the home key in one position of the finger only, so most of the time you'll need two hands to use it properly. The other new sensor, the heart rate one near the LED flash on the back, also needs some time to work, as it will read your pulse for 10 seconds and more before it registers a score. Both are useful features if you need them, just not as quick as they should be. The Galaxy S5 features a smidgen larger 5.1-inch 1080p Super AMOLED panel that's notable for delivering 500 plus nits of brightness in automatic mode, like under bright sunlight for example. The Xperia Z1 packs a 5-inch 1080p triluminous display with similar pixel density, which exhibits somewhat pale and washed out colors. The S5 panel is the best and brightest AMOLED Samsung has done to date, but color reproduction hasn't changed much. It still has bluish tone and punchy oversaturated colors with emphasis on blue and green. The default standard mode of the screen, which would likely be the way most of the people will keep on their phone, shows the cold curse of AMOLED displays in full force. We measured the abominable 8000 kelvins, making the screen's white appear very bluish. The professional and cinema modes have better color temperature and slightly more accurate colors, but still come with this AMOLED feel. The S5's biggest advantage before the Z1's display, however, are the viewing angles. While Sony used an older twisted pneumatic LCD technology where brightness and contrast drop dramatically with the slightest tilt of the phone, on the S5 the colors, brightness and black levels barely budge even at the most extreme angles. Besides being brighter than the Z1's panel, the S5 screen also has a lower minimum brightness of 2 nits, which is helping your eyes in dark surroundings, while on the Z1 you can just see the backlight seeping through the color filters. As a whole, Samsung's S5 screen is more vivid to look at, albeit oversaturated, and with way better black levels and good viewing angles. It also offers more functions, as its super sensitive Synaptics touch layer allows you to use it with gloves or hover your finger over the screen previewing content without touching it. Samsung has toned things down with its customized TouchWiz experience layered on top of Android 4.4 KitKat when compared to previous versions. Gone are the abundant S-branded apps, and the menu sections and icons have received a flatter, simpler look. It doesn't look very uniform this way, as the home screens and widgets have remained the same, but it is highly functional. There are numerous new features in that version, like Private Mode and Kit Corner, aimed to make your multi-user life with the handset easier. We can also count on Samsung's multi-window mode that divides the 5.1-inch display into resizable sections that can run two apps independent of each other at once, aiding your multitasking needs. The Xperia UI running on the Z1, on the other hand, is a simpler Android KitKat overlay, counting on a few widgets and wallpapers, as well as some branded apps to make it stand out. It does offer a few small apps you can float on top of the home screens underneath, and that's as far as multitasking goes here. Being the newer device, the Samsung Galaxy S5 is sure to attract the geeky crowd with its quad-core 2.5 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor. Paired with 2 GB of RAM, thanks to that new piece of silicon, the S5 manages to maintain a very fast and consistent performance. Despite being outclassed on paper by its rival, the Xperia Z1's quad-core 2.2 GHz Snapdragon 800 processor with 2 GB of RAM exhibits the same likable interface movements. Its graphics processor is clocked much lower though, so the S5 is superior in 3D graphics and image rendering, as the benchmarks clearly show. The two handsets are stuffed with 16 GB of internal storage, which can be supplemented thanks to their microSD card slots, and the S5 will also come in a 32 GB version. Since it's on the site, we prefer the location of the slot in the Xperia Z1 more, mainly because we have to remove the back cover of the S5 to access its slot. As can be expected from the fast chipsets, browsing on the Z1 and the S5 is fast, smooth, and offers fluid zooming, scrolling, or panning. Sony, however, uses Android KitKat's default Chrome browser, which doesn't let you sideload Adobe Flash like the Samsung browser on the S5. The handsets have multi-band LTE and 3G radios, depending on the area they're sold in, as well as a suite of other connectivity options such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0, assisted GPS, NFC, and DLNA. Galaxy S5 launched download booster mode, which combines Wi-Fi and cellular data for quicker connections. It also offers an Ethernet port at the top, which can be used to command home electronics like TVs, stereos, and even air conditioning units of various brands. The Galaxy S5 gallery, as well as the one on the Xperia Z1, offer grid thumbnail view of your photos and videos with editing options built right into the app's interface. Samsung, however, gives the options of a split-screen navigation with folders on the left and their content on the right, which is more comfortable to use. The music players also suggest categorization options by artist, albums, or playlists with plenty of sound modes and equalizer effects to choose from. Sony's Walkman branded music player, however, has a richer, more pleasant to look at interface. Video playback on the large displays of the Galaxy S5 and Z1 is a very enjoyable experience until you tilt the screen when the Z1 starts to show washed out colors and diminished contrast. The stock player on the S5 runs everything you throw at it, save for DivX files, while the Z1 plays those without a hitch in up to 1080p resolution. The Galaxy S5 packs a new 16-megapixel camera that features one of the fastest focusing times in a smartphone camera thanks to the new face detection autofocus system. Don't count out Sony's pride and joy just yet, as it flaunts an even higher resolution 20-megapixel autofocus camera with wider f2.0 aperture lens and a larger sensor. There are several overlapping modes and manual controls with the two smartphones in question, but they each have their own unique perks that stand out too. For the Galaxy S5, it has a neat selective focus function that allows us to give that blurred look to the front and the background. Sony's Xperia Z1 counters with a bunch of augmented reality shooting modes that add some fun and life to the experience. Other than those, plenty of additional shooting modes can be fired up on both cameras, including panorama and macro. The S5 has the upper hand here with real-time HDR photography for both stills and video recording. Its camera app interface is also slightly easier to figure out than the cluttered options in the Xperia UI menu. As for the pictures taken with the two most resolute cameras on Android phones, the amount of detail captured with both seems to be on par. We use this Z1 in its auto mode, which captures 8-megapixel photos. Although they're not full-size 20-megapixel samples, Sony chooses this as the default option. We agree, as it delivers samples with good amount of detail with less artifacts than the full-size photos. The Galaxy S5 pics come out with a tad saturated colors, but color reproduction is generally good on the pleasant side. Noise is an issue with both handsets, but it creeps up especially badly indoors in the case of the Xperia Z1. Samsung's phone can record 4K video at 30 frames per second as well as 1080p video at 60. The Z1 makes do with 1080p, and that, however, is more than adequate for all purposes. Moreover, some enterprising models have been unlocking experimental 4K video recording modes on the Z1 for a while too. The video quality from both handsets is quite good, though it looks more appealing with the Galaxy S5 because of the overblown colors. The Xperia Z1's continuous autofocus also wanders too much, while the S5 keeps its eye on the prize at all times. The Samsung Galaxy S5 and Sony Xperia Z1 offer two very distinct vessels to enjoy Android KitKat. Sony's handset is the one with the more premium steel and glass waterproof design, while Samsung counters with a plastic water-resistant chassis that lets you easily swap the battery if needed. We aren't pointing out its fingerprint scanner and heart rate sensor as grand advantages over the Z1, as they're a bit cumbersome to use and most people won't use them on a regular basis. Even if we isolate those two extra features though, the Galaxy S5 still registers as the better handset, if you don't mind the plastic build. It has a better display in most aspects, superior graphics and image processing power, thanks to the Snapdragon 801 processor and an IR blaster at the top that lets you control home electronics like a TV or even air conditioner. Its camera might be of lower resolution than the Z1, but it's on par in terms of detail. On top of that, it offers neat options like 4K video, real-time HDR and selective focus, which the Z1 can't master. When we add to this laundry list of advantages, almost twice longer battery life with the S5 compared to the Z1, the scales will be easily tipped in Samsung's favor. If the high price isn't an issue for you, of course. This was a video comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S5 and the Sony Xperia Z1 from Phone Arena. For more information about these and other handsets, you can visit us at phonearena.com.